Well, we know the news. The economy shrank by a record 9.9% last year as coronavirus restrictions hit output. This is the ONS statistics, a reliable body. Of course, the contraction in 2020 was more than twice as much as the previous largest annual fall on record, according to their main statistician, Jonathan Atho. Now, this is not news, I don't think, to many of us. Did we really think we were in for a big old rise? We are service-led as an economy as well, which means we would have taken maybe a bit more of a hit than perhaps other countries too. Lots of figures out there to wade through on this, but I think it's kind of your story that I want here. We talk a lot on this program about how businesses are doing, and I want to look at that, whatever sector you're in, whether it's hospitality, whether it's retail, trade, transportation. Restaurants and hospitality, of course. I mean, they are right top of the list, front and centre of areas we know that are really going to struggle to come back from this. And I want to hear from all of those sectors. And if that's you, it's a business you own, no matter how large or matter how small it might be. It could be a one-man band. That's cool. 0344 499 1000. But what about just kind of everyone else? Not everyone owns a business. Plenty of people work for them. If you work in retail right now, I mean, I saw that figure that up to 9 million jobs are under threat, with 600,000 UK firms at risk of collapse if the government doesn't extend support measures. 1 in 3 businesses have less than 3 months of cash reserves, considered the danger point for firms. In the 4 months to the end of January, research by the Institute for Public Policy Research revealed these disturbing figures. Now, these are kind of worst case scenarios. One of the things on talkRADIO that I think we do, I'd like to think we do pretty well, while the others are pointing fingers and looking for all the doom and saying, how can we pin this just solely on Boris Johnson or just the government or whoever? We try to look for those kind of chinks of light. We try to look for that scintilla of hope within difficult and challenging stories. But you have to be honest about the terrain right now, and it's tricky. I don't think anybody would dispute that it's tricky, and I don't suppose it was ever going to be any other way. We have literally closed an economy for a year. And at the risk of kind of repeating myself, if somebody had said to us a couple of years back that you'll be on the radio discussing how the entirety of the economy was closed for a year, possibly more before we get through all of this, well, we wouldn't have even understood the premise, right? I mean, the premise wouldn't have made any sense. Even if somebody had said, well, what if there's a pandemic? You'd say, well, yeah, okay. We're not going to close all the economy, though, are they? Not going to close all the schools. I mean, that'd be ridiculous. Here we are, kids. Here we are. It is closed down. I mean, there are elements that are open, of course. So it could only ever be like this. I don't know why anybody would sit there scratching their head saying, I can't believe it, the economy shrank. Well, of course it shrank. It's been closed. You half-wit. It's been closed for a year. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think they were going to suddenly announce exactly that suddenly the economy had sprung into action and we were leaps and bounds ahead of anything and the economic forecast had never been brighter than it is today? I mean, that would be ridiculous. So I'm not surprised to get these latest figures. The question for me is, where does this story go next? And if you are in business yourself, whatever area you work in, how is this panning out for you now? We visit this subject every now and again, and it's timely that today we should, because of these latest economic news. Let's have a listen to what the Chancellor said, reacting to these figures.
Well, actually, it's a little bit better than places like Canada, Italy, Spain and Germany when I looked at it, but it's definitely in line to slightly better. And actually, our employment performance, if you look at unemployment or the change in employment, is, again, better than most of our international peers. What the numbers show is that our economy suffered a significant shock last year. And whilst there was some resilience in winter, what's clear is that right now many families, many businesses are experiencing hardship, and that's why it's right that we've provided the comprehensive support that we have through our plan for jobs, and we'll be setting out the next stage of that at budget in early March.
You see, I like that. There is, I think he's a realist. He's a bright bloke, clearly, super sharp. There's good news in there, right? I mean, he's not pitching up on the TV and telling everybody that it's doom and gloom and forget any thought of a bright future. The chances of having a job or any sort of level of income over the next few months is absolutely zero. He's not saying that. He's saying, actually, set this. And this is, again, where I think we depart from other outlets and broadcasters. where this kind of news of both COVID and deaths and economic news is discussed almost as if we're in some kind of vacuum here, like it's just us. I mean, even Nicola Sturgeon isn't included in the bad news, which is extraordinary. That's another debate altogether. In terms of what's happening right now, I want to hear where you're at, okay, as a company, as an individual running your own affairs, as a shop worker, as somebody who's still on furlough. Remember, there's people on nearly been on furlough for a year. People haven't worked for a year. And now, I know there's a perception, well, I wish I could lay on the sofa and take 80% of my salary and not go to work and sit at home all day playing Minecraft. I'm sure that's a nice existence for some. I think most people probably want to get back to a semblance of normality, because it's not just the work thing, it's everything that goes with it, right? It's being able to go out for a pint with some friends, grabbing a bite to eat with your family. I think that's what most of us are all about, isn't it? Just getting on with things. We don't want loads. Semblance of normality is what we want back. But if you're in that place, that you are one of the furloughed, because there's a very real possibility that a percentage, I would hate to hazard a guess what percentage, but a percentage of those furloughed people are not going to be going back to work because the company they work for will not be returning to normal business, if at all. 0344 499 1000. So let's just use this section. And we'll talk to lots of interested parties in this. We'll talk to those that are involved in the difficulties of companies closing down. We'll talk to people who are in different professions, who are trying to scratching their head, wondering what the heck is going on. We'll talk to people who are wondering why the government helped that group of people, but not that group of people. So there's a broad church of issues to throw out. And the question I just want to put to you is, are you coping financially with all of this, whether you run a business or not? This is difficult, right? This is really, really tricky. Even if you're on 80% of your salary on furlough, and remember, lots of people are off work because they've been made redundant from work and scratching their head. I mean, I mentioned my sister, who was made redundant in, I think it was the end of October. And she was in that place. She was furloughed for a bit, and then they had a round of redundancies, and she was one of those people, and she's looking for work, and she's not in a highly skilled place, but there are few, or if any, jobs around. And she said to me the other day, she said the only jobs, oddly, were at the hospital, which is a place a lot of people don't want to be right now. Whether it was portering jobs or, she was talking about clerical jobs, working in the shop, whatever it happens to be. A lot of people don't want to be around a hospital right now. You can understand the reasons why. 0344 499 1000. I do think we will recover. Michael Howard, the former Tory leader, told this programme just on Monday this week that he actually thinks the future for this country will be better in the short term to come, despite the difficulties we've been through. And we've got the Brexit thing to surmount. We've got coronavirus to surmount. We've got a contracting economy to surmount. There is only one way, and that's upwards right now. So I do think, generally speaking, this whole economic cycle thing, when you hear usually the left talk about how this is, almost an irretrievable position we found. Look, well, it's outrageous what's going on. Johnson's got blood on his hands. Rishi's got blood. It's all their fault, etc. Completely obviating the global component of both of those stories, which is in itself extraordinary. But these things are cyclical. I mean, even if you had no pandemic and you just had a dirty, big global recession going on, we do come out the other side. People do get jobs back. New businesses begin. People start new initiatives. Let's talk about that as well. So let's get those stories in there as well. If you are finding a new way of doing business, a new avenue, a string to your bow, I want to hear all about that. Julian Jessop, friend of the show, independent economist, is with us. Julian, afternoon to you. Do you happen to know what happened in 1709?
Sadly, I do. There was a great frost, apparently. And of course, looking out my window at the moment, I think we're getting something pretty similar now. Yes,
indeed. So that was weather related. This, of course, is related largely to the pandemic. I mean, just talk us through this 9.9% shrinkage of the economy. Is this these the sort of numbers we expected, Julian?
Well, they were. I mean, when you lock down the economy in the way that we have, then it's inevitable that there's a big fall in economic activity, and that's what these numbers are showing. They were, though, as you said, not actually quite as bad as some people had expected. Lots of people were expecting an even bigger fall and a fall in the final 3 months of last year, whereas actually we managed a little bit of growth.
Yeah.
Now, that's nothing to get too excited about. We know that the current quarter is going to see another fall because of the third national lockdown. But at least things aren't quite as bad as some people were thinking they might be.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak in the sort of one interview I think he's given, I'm sure he did what they call a pooled interview where he's probably spoke to a few outlets, but certainly what he seems to have said is that other countries around the world have done worse than us. I know it's not a race to the bottom, but I guess this is a global story and therefore has to be put in a sort of global context.
Yes, that's right. If you look at the headline numbers, then the fall in the size of the economy was a bit bigger in the UK than in other countries. But there are some sort of special factors, I think, that explain that. In particular, we measure GDP, economic activity, in a slightly different way than some other countries do. The bigger picture, of course, is that everywhere has seen a big fall. I think there are reasons for to be a bit more optimistic about the UK, though, this year, because, of course, we've been able to roll out the vaccines a bit sooner than other countries, particularly in Europe. So hopefully we'll lift the lockdown sooner as well.
In terms of getting ourselves back on track, I mean, clearly easing the lockdown is key to all of this. You just reference the fact that we may have a quicker route out of that than other countries do. But I keep reading survey after survey, Julian, that says even if we do that, there's going to, one suggests there's going to be, or could well be, amidst all this doom and gloom, 600,000 UK firms at risk of collapse. That seems an awful lot, even allowing for the grim times.
Yes, certainly just lifting the lockdown isn't enough. It's important, but there are other things that still have to be done too. And I think I focus on two things. First of all, the government needs to continue to support those sectors that are facing substantial restrictions. So that means the hospitality sector in particular, but also sort of broader support packages like the furlough scheme and the extension to universal credit. I think they should be extended a bit further. The other thing, though, is sort of something they shouldn't do, which is even to be talking about raising taxes. I mean, we're still seeing this. The budget is the beginning of March.
Yeah.
You hear news stories every day about new taxes that the Chancellor might raise. I think that would be madness. We're just coming off a year where the economy shrank by 10%. We'll probably still see another fall in the first quarter this year. It's simply far too soon to be raising taxes. He should knock that idea on the head as soon as possible.
What about the chief economist of the Bank of England, who said that the economy is poised like a coiled spring to recover, and the good times are clearly around the corner somewhere?
Well, that's Andy Haldane, and I agree with him. I think that we will get a strong economic recovery this year, but there are a number of risks to that on the downside. And one is that the vaccine rollout doesn't go as well as hoped, or that new variants start to dominate again. But another, I think, is that the Chancellor makes a mistake and raises fiscal policy too soon. I think we need to nurture this recovery, not do anything that might hold it back.
How do we pay it all back? Because there's, Squillian's telephone number-like figures have been borrowed, and we've had to not so much rob Peter to pay Paul, but all the money that's available anywhere has been taken and thrown into all sorts of initiatives and schemes and furloughs and grants and the like. I mean, that's going to take yonks to pay it back. When we've spoken before, Julian, you've been quite relaxed about our ability to do that.
Well, I still am. I mean, one of the great things about being a government, if you like, is that you don't have to worry about paying things back. You can simply roll the debt over as it matures. And in the meantime, interest rates are, of course, extremely low. So, yes, I'd much rather that debt was a lot lower than it is now. But I think that's the price we've had to pay to support the economy. More importantly, as the economy recovers, then borrowing will fall because tax revenues will go up and the government can withdraw some of the emergency measures. And the level of debt will become less important relative to the overall size of the economy. So, there are longer term challenges and we may need to look at raising taxes for other reasons, but I don't think we need to think about raising them now to pay for COVID. Yeah,
good work, Julian. Thank you. It's always good to get your take on these things. Julian Jessop, independent economist, very much a realist in this discussion and rarely goes down that rather grim avenue of pessimism that is it's so easy to latch yourself onto that and then just open the lines up and say life's a load of old, you know the rest. Clearly there are those stories. We're realists here. On top of that, also on the lookout for stories where you can see where this whole story or this whole picture could begin some form, a semblance of recovery. And I was looking at those December figures where the economy did grow in December, 1.2%, but it grew. It had shrunk the month before, but it had what they call a bounce back in December. Hospitality, car sales, hairdressing recovered some of that lost ground. And that just goes to show, I mean, it's got to, you begin to open up. You'd think, well, it's got to grow because you're going from not just a low base, a no base, really. If you've been shut for 6 months and then you open up, one customer will show growth, one would have thought. 0344 499 1000. I want to know what it's like in your own neck of the woods, whether that's your own. I mean, the question I threw out is, are you coping financially? And that encompasses both those that run businesses and those that just work for a business in whatever capacity it is, whether you drive a cab, whether you work in a shop, whether you do something in the world of hospitality, whatever it is. You might not be the owner. What's your job looking like? And what does that mean for security, paying bills, the mortgage? I mean, they talk in the good times about how people are only, a couple of paychecks away from losing things, and that's how brittle security can be for some people at the moment. I would say you've kind of ramped up that possibility significantly. 0344 499 1000.